So this video will be about the 2014 Mr. Olympia contest. Phil Heath won his fourth Olympia title defeating Greene, who was placed second. That was Kai's last Olympia contest. He was placed second to Phil in 2012, 2013 and 2014 and never competed on the Olympia stage again. The front double biceps shows the incredible peak Kai has in his biceps, but it also shows that his short biceps do not extend long enough to connect with his thin forearms. Phil, on the other hand, has great arms package. His biceps are huge and perfectly connect with his massive forearms. Phil's arms are genetically better looking than those of Kai and definitely more aesthetic with the balance he has between his arms and forearms. Kai's lats are wider, so he hits a more impressive V-taper than Phil. Both had great wheels which are highly defined, separated and conditioned, but they were both not as sharp as they were in previous years. Kai wins the front double biceps. The front lat spread shows the width Kai has in his lats over Phil. On the other hand, Phil in this pose looks fuller and more rounded and pumped in his shoulders, bigger arms and forearms, and rounded chest. Notice how small and rather thin Kai's arms and forearms are compared to those of Phil in this pose in specific. Their wheels are huge, separated, and highly conditioned. Phil definitely looks more impressive with his rounded muscular groups, but Kai has the wider lats, so he wins the front lat spread. Both hit a great side chest. We can see the striations in their chest and the veins in their shoulders and arms. Phil's chest looks thicker and more rounded though. Obviously, Phil was not the only one who had the bubble gut that year. But the rant Louis Marco made, claiming that Kai was robbed to a bloated Phil Heath, gave the impression that Phil was the only one who had this problem, which is not true at all. Another side chest pose shows that Kai was more bloated than Phil in this pose in specific. Great conditioning for them both, especially in the lower section with their striated glutes and ripped quads. Phil wins the side chest. The side triceps shows Phil's superiority in his shoulders and triceps groups. Although Kai managed to add great size, but his shoulders were still not as rounded or as full as those of Phil. Although Kai's triceps are striated, but they are smaller and thinner than those of Phil. Their wheels are highly defined and conditioned with a great pump in their hamstrings. Phil wins the side triceps. The back double biceps shows the great progress Kai managed to achieve in his back area. He is more huge, detailed, and more conditioned than ever. His lats are definitely wider than those of Phil, but his traps, which happens to be one of his major weaknesses along with his forearms, are still not as impressive as those of Phil. The peak in Kai's biceps is insane, but it is distorted by his thin forearms in comparison to Phil's symmetrical arms and forearms groups. Another back double biceps shows the incredible muscularity both had in their back areas that year. Phil's traps are bigger and more impressive, but Kai definitely packs more muscles in his lats and lower back. Phil's shoulders are fuller and more rounded compared to Kai's shoulders, which have this gap between the deltoid and the traps. Phil's arms and forearms are more symmetrical and balanced than those of Kai, who has huge arms but thin forearms. Phil's glutes are more striated and better conditioned, but both overall have great separated and ripped hamstrings. It is a tough call indeed to decide who would win this pose, but overall I would give it to Phil, because he looks more aesthetic and symmetrical than Kai and doesn't have major flaws. The back lat spread shows the width Kai has in his lats over Phil, but it also shows that Phil overall is sharper and more conditioned, although in my opinion they both were not as sharp as they were in previous years. Phil's traps are massive and perfectly extend from his neck towards his lower back. His glutes are striated and insanely ripped, and both have incredible hamstrings development. A great pose for them both, but I would give the back lat spread to Phil Heath. The abs and thighs shows the high conditioning they both had in their midsection and thighs areas. Phil's abs have always been among his least impressive groups, but he still shows great details and visible obliques. His thighs are huge, conditioned, and incredibly separated. Kai's stomach, on the other hand, is bloated in this shot, which really raises the question about the reason Louis Marco made all that rant about Phil's bubble gut when Kai himself also had this problem, as we saw in more than one shot. Kai's abs, however, have always been more impressive than those of Phil. We can see the insane development of his obliques and the visible striations in his huge quads. A great pose for them both, but Kai would win the abs and thighs. The standing most muscular pose shows few issues to be pointed out. Notice how flattened Kai's chest in comparison to Phil's rounded and pumped chest. Notice the difference in shape between Kai and Phil's biceps, triceps, and forearms in favor of Phil. His biceps and triceps extend better, and his forearms are way more huge and in balance with the arms than Kai's thin forearms. Phil's shoulders, chest, and arms are incredibly pumped and ripped with visible striations in his chest and shoulders. His wheels are huge, conditioned, and incredibly separated. Kai's conditioning, on the other hand, is also mind-blowing with visible striations in the quads. The crab most muscular pose shows Phil's incredible traps and the rounded and full shoulders in comparison to those of Kai, which look rather flattened. There is a huge difference in size and symmetry between Phil and Kai when it comes to their arms and forearms in favor of Phil in this pose. Kai's thin forearms do not match his massive arms, contrary to Phil, whose arms and forearms are in perfect balance. Their wheels are huge, separated, and highly conditioned. A third most muscular pose shows that Phil's shoulders are fuller and more rounded. His biceps and triceps extend better and longer than those of Kai. His forearms destroy those thin forearms of Kai. Kai also wasn't as sharp or as conditioned as Phil was, and definitely not as sharp as he was in earlier contests, maybe due to the fact that he added size in 2014. The most muscular pose is won by Phil Heath. So bottom line, was Phil at his best? Definitely not. Was Kai good enough to beat Phil? No, he wasn't, in my opinion. Kai may have some of the freakiest muscular groups, such as his lats and quads, but judges do not observe bodybuilders' physiques like fans do. They approach the package as whole. Phil's package was more balanced, more aesthetic, and definitely better regarding specific groups such as his shoulders, chest, arms, glutes, and overall conditioning. The rant Louis Marco made about Phil's bubble gut was exaggerated in my opinion. Phil definitely had a bubble gut, and maybe more than the rest. But are we dinging Phil for having a bubble gut or for having a bigger gut than Kai? Most of current bodybuilders have this bubble gut at one time or another, including Kai Greene himself, as we saw in some of these shots. That was all for this video. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. Thanks for watching, and have a nice one.